This is a show that brings to the forefront newsmakers, entertainers, and those making a difference in our lives and in our world. Each week is a new adventure with topics ranging from the most serious and cutting edge to the most lighthearted and entertaining.
This is Taking Care of Business with Richard Solomon.
Look at all these people standing in line, waiting like cattle, what will they find? Wondering where yesterday went. Think of all the moments passing us by, count the minutes, see how they fly, and think of the moments you still have.
Greetings, everyone. Richard Solomon, Taking Care of Business. This week in the studio, Vista Hill. Why don't you just check them out for a minute before we introduce the band?
Like you don't need the money, love like you've never been hurt, dance as if no one's watching, sing like you want to be heard, and live like it's heaven on earth, and live like it's heaven on. For all the times you thought you were right, screaming so loud just to win the fight, what did you have to give up in return?
All right, Richard Solomon, welcome to Taking Care of Business. And this is a co-production with My Father's Place. And we got Sherman Arnowitz and Mark Brenner from Vista Hill. By the way, VistaHillBand.com. So if you're in front of a computer, if you're streamcasting this, go check out their website. And but we're going to talk. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us,
Rick.
Thank you.
So for the people who are going to be hearing this before you perform at My Father's Place, everybody should know that they're going to be performing at My Father's Place at the Roslyn Hotel, the new My Father's Place. But the band also has a history of playing at the old My Father's Place in Roslyn on Bryan Avenue. We'll get into that. So just again, we have Sherman Arnowitz and we got Mark Brenner. And so this is really awesome. So let's talk. Tell me about the band and what was the song that we introed the show with?
Great. Thanks for having us, Rich. We really appreciate it.
We love having local people, and I understand you're going to tell us a little bit that you're lifelong friends, from childhood. And
absolutely.
That's always, it's always so.
We're going to laugh. We're going to cry this hour. It's just going to be very, very lovely. That song, by the way, is called Moments, and we most of the time we close our show with that. It's a fan favorite. It's just an upbeat song talking about taking advantage of every moment and don't worrying about the little things and just look at the big picture and just live life dance like there's no one watching and sing like you want to be heard. And it's just a very powerful song.
And be on the radio like no one's listening.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope they are. Kind of a Carpe Diem song.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So that's from an album?
That's from our first album, Looking for Tara. Vista Hill is a 4-piece band. I'm the lead singer, and I play acoustic guitar. Mark is also a singer and is in charge of keyboards and our orchestra leader. And then we have a bass player, Todd Roberto, and we have a drummer, Richie Shapiro. So
all right.
It's just the four of us.
So a beautiful quartet.
Absolutely.
All right, so you guys knew each other from childhood.
Yes.
So tell me about that. That's always a good story.
Yeah, our families were fairly close, and they were in the neighborhood, and we used to hang out. From time to time, we'd play some music together. We'd play some tennis together, hang out and listen to music together, pick up girls together, and we never actually blossomed into a full band at that time until we were a little older, and we really fully connected about 2007. So, because I wasn't playing with a band at the time, and Sherman had a need for a keyboard player, and I said I'd come and check it out. They checked me out. I checked them out. It was a great fit.
All right. So, what was the first song you guys remember playing as kids together that you actually, was an original song?
Let me preface by saying we grew up in Lake Success, and Lake Success had the Lake Success pool. I'm about 3 years younger than Mark, and I remember being in the pool and seeing Mark, and I think at the time his girlfriend Susie setting up the keyboards and the microphones, and I wasn't performing at the time, and I just looked at him and I said, "That guy is so cool. They're playing they got the Lake Success Country Club pool gig," and it was just so exciting, and nobody was really listening, but it was just like like so cool that here's a guy with the keyboards and his girlfriend was singing, and it was happenstance. And what happened was I was taking my girls on a vacation in Sarasota, Florida, and we went to the movies. And who did we bump into? But Mark, who I hadn't seen in a couple years. And we just kind of got together and, hey, what are you up to? What am I up to? Okay, bye. Next day, I was with my girls out to dinner. Who do we bump into again? Mark and his family. So now all of a sudden we're like, hey, you know what? I'm doing this project. It's not. I'm looking for a 4-piece. Why don't you come down? We'll start playing together. And that's really how it started. It's just kind of happenstance and the universe talking and getting us together.
And I think the thing that drew me to the band was Sherman's songwriting, which is special. I mean, it's heartfelt. It's accessible to anyone who listens. Music is relatively easy to listen to itself. It's not, bopping you over the head with it. And I enjoyed listening to it. I thought it might be fun to be part of it.
The other thing is, if you go to a Vista Hill concert, you're going to see people from 5 years old to 95 years old. It's the type of music that everybody likes to listen to. Most of the stuff is very upbeat, and we just really enjoy playing it. The nice thing is that Mark has a jazz background, and so I'll write a song and I'll present it to the band. And there's a little jazz and Latin going on. And so I'll have my thoughts of what the song should be. But as I write it and then I present it to the band, all of a sudden someone will say, well, what if we changed the timing? Or what if we added this? And so not all the time what I have in my head is the final product with the input from everybody else. So to me, that's the cool collaboration of it.
And that's not usual for a singer-songwriter to say, okay, where do you want to take this? How do you want to change it? I mean, to be that open and, honestly vulnerable, is quite a quality. And so we end up, we may spend a whole evening kind of collaborating on the different ways the song could go.
Now, were there times when Sharman, you've written a song and then you go, nah, and then you completely rewrite it,
Yes.
So what I'm always fascinated by the songwriting process. I know that some people say that the songs are just out there and you have to pull them out. I think Paul McCartney said that, and
he stole that from me. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Then there are other people who like the band Blu-rays. I think one guy makes the music, and then he asks the other guys to kind of put the lyrics and the other stuff, in it. How does it work for you? Like, do you walk around? I always ask, do you walk around with pads or recorders, and do you wake up in the middle of the night, write something so you don't forget it?
First of all, it's the most intimate activity because you have a spark, a thought, and that thought is based on a feeling. And whether it's I got into a fight with my daughter, or whatever it is, it's just that spark. And from that spark, I remember being in therapy and we were talking about my childhood, and I said, yeah, it was always like I was wearing a suit of armor. And that really stuck with me. And I went home and I started writing a song using that metaphor of suit of armor and how I needed to protect myself from my siblings and my parents. And so it's very intimate, it's very vulnerable. And for me as a songwriter, when I have that piece of paper in my hand and I think I'm ready and I present it to the band, it's a little nerve-wracking because there have been times where I could look at, Mark's face or one of the other guys' face and they're like, interesting. Or what's worse is when they say, yeah, and they'll start playing it, and it's a song that's already been published, but I didn't hear it when I was kind of creating. So for me, the writing it's either a word that comes to mind, like suit of armor, that just comes out.
Probably a phrase. Okay.
A phrase,
yeah.
And you're like, wow, I'm going to do something about that. Or maybe it's just a melody line that's in my head, and then I'll start working from that point forward.
And then one of the things that I like to do is think about the different sounds. I play a bunch of different keyboards, and so I have access to any kind of sounds from horns to strings to marimbas, whatever you need. And, for example, the song Promenade. I decided it might be a good idea to have a accordion / harmonica playing to open it up, which gives it's a French song kind of, and it's in 3/4 time, and everyone kind of agreed that was the way to go. So those musical changes, I mean, they can change a song dramatically.
Now, are there times when a song has evolved over time and it starts one way and everybody agrees on the song, but then somehow it becomes something a little different over time, either through improv or just someone says, let's get a little wacky. I mean, do you have that?
We've gotten pretty wacky. There are a couple of songs that really lend themselves towards a jazz feel, and so when it comes to solo time, because actually the drummer and I played for 40 years together. He's a fantastic drummer. He's played in every different genre, but we meld very well together jazz-wise, and so we end up taking it out maybe a little bit too far out for some people's tastes. But
yeah, I'm a very meat and potatoes when it comes to music, and so for me, I might be the songwriter, but I'm the worst musician of the band, meaning I don't have as much training as these guys. So when they start taking off and they go, yeah, let's do it at a 4/4, blah, 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 and I'm like, what? And then all of a sudden they'll start going off on their own like they're speaking a different language. So I kind of feel like I'm not invited to the party.
You're invited.
All right, so for everybody out there, let's play a song. Should we play Making Waves in its entirety so people can actually appreciate that song? Or you want to... What would you like? Do you want to play something else?
I'd rather go on the new album.
Okay.
Why don't we do I Could?
Let's take a look.
When Mark talks about his keyboard and what he's able to do with the keyboard, towards the end of the song, he starts bringing in horns.
All right. So this is from the album Here Comes Life, and the song is called I Could, and you can find this at vistahillband.com. So here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Vista Hill.
I could talk with you all night on the telephone, tell you how much I miss you, how I'm all alone. I could be a knight in armor, protect you from your fears, keep you always laughing, dry up all your tears. Well, I guess that love comes in many colors. One man's red is another man's blue. When I'm with you, all I see are rainbows. Your colors are why I love you. Your colors are why I love you. I could hold you in my arms all night long. I could shower you with praises or write you a song. I could share all my secrets, tell you all my fears, and promise to love you for 1,000,000 years. Well, I guess that love comes in many colors. One man's red is another man's blue. When I'm with you, all I see are rainbows. Your colors are why I love you. Colors are why I love you. Listen here now. I love the way you comb your hair. I love the way you're always there. I love the way you make me feel. Sometimes I'm just speechless. I could draw you back, recite you a poem, beg you to stay over and call this home. I could write you a letter, seal it with a kiss, hope for forever and make a wish. Well, I guess that love comes in many colors. One man's red is another man's blue. When I'm with you, all I see are rainbows, the colors of why I love you. The colors of why I love you. The colors of why I love you.
You know, for a minute, I thought it was in New Orleans.
Yeah, kind of a ragtime thing.
You know, it's very interesting. For four people, you have much more sound than four people. You know, that it's a testament to how great your musicianship is, because, you know, look, you know, we all hear all kinds of, you know, 4-piece bands, but you really, you know, if somebody said how many people are, you know, in the recording studio, said 6, 7, you know, so you really have a great richness of sound. In the 2 minutes we have left in this segment, tell me about that song and you know, your inspirations and what was behind it and sort of the, you know.
I was having a discussion with my wife, Gail, and we were talking about relationships, and she had mentioned, you know, well, why couldn't you do this, or why would you want to do that? And it was done in a very innocent way, and I kept saying, I could. Yeah, I guess I could do that. I could do that. And then it prompted me to say, there's a difference of kind of saying I could and I could because I want
or
to.
I will.
Exactly. Or I
Shall.
will.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of became, these are all the things that I want to do for you. And it's not because I need to or I have to do it. It's because I want to do it. And that was the origin of the song.
Cool. All right, we have 1 minute left. So when we come back, let's talk about let's talk a little bit about you're playing at my father's place, both past and future, because that's going to be kind of cool.
Great.
All right, so this is Richard Solomon with the band Vista Hill. It's vistahillband.com on the internet. They have all this music that's just great to listen to. And we were with Sherman Arnowitz and Mark Brenner in the studio. And keep it locked here, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is the Great Thordini. You're listening to Richard Solomon on 88.1 FM WCWP.
It was bound to happen sometime along the way. I guess I forgot some Hallmark holiday.
That song is The 9th of May. The band is Vista Hill Band. VistaHillBand.com, Vista Hill. Richard Solomon in the studio with Sherman Arnowitz and Mark Brenner. Let's just get another little taste of their music. This is The 9th of May.
As I try to beg for your forgiveness.
All righty, so let's talk a little bit about My Father's Place.
Yeah.
So, Mark, you actually played at the old My Father's Place on Bryan Avenue.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
It was a great venue. Everyone played there. And I had just joined a kind of a fusion band, jazz fusion band. Gary Vedder was the leader drummer. We had a kick-ass guitar player and a great bass player, and it was more jazz than rock, and it was, you know, really jazz fusion, which was really coming into its own, you know, in the mid '70s, and this was toward the latter part of the '70s and '80s. So we played there a few times, had a nice little following.
And what was it like, you know, and did you go to did you see other people's shows, either during your show or before and after? Or
honestly, I don't think I went to a whole lot of shows there.
All right. What was it like to play there in those days? Was there like a vibe? Was there an energy?
Definitely vibe. People came there to listen to the music, and they were, you know, they paid attention. It wasn't like they were there to have a meal and a drink and just music was in the background. They were there to listen, which is sometimes a rarity today.
I believe it, the new My Father's Place, is like that.
Yeah.
People like are really there to like listen to all kinds of music.
Not many places on Long Island or the city really that are geared for that. That you're sitting there wanting to listen to the music.
Well, what's kind of cool is you kind of eat first, and then sort of when that's out of the way, then the performers come on. So you've had your nice meal, and then I guess then you're full and can pay attention.
and I've had a couple of drinks. Right?
And that's really cool. And I'll tell you, I've seen a number of shows, and the sound is amazing. That's the one thing I could say compared to almost any other venue I've been to. They spent so much time and effort on putting together a world-class, custom-made sound system where no matter where you really sit, the sound is really perfect at every angle. And it's a big enough venue and it's a small enough venue that the sound is just really pristine and in a way that you don't really get anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think if the sound is anywhere what it was back then, they did a great job. One of the most important things, as far as I'm concerned, which is if I'm on the stage and I don't hear myself well, or I don't hear good sound coming out in the monitors facing us, it makes it difficult to play well. Or you can't play your top level unless the sound that you're hearing is where you want it to be, and that's something that they did well then, and I'm sure they're going to be doing it well now.
All right. So I guess I'll try to see you guys at the sound check or something like that when you come down there. But I'm telling you, the sound is great. Have you actually seen the new venue yet?
Not yet. Pictures of it.
It's a beautiful venue, and it's very comfortable, and the food is really good. They have a chef that's just world class. So I've had all the food. One of the cool things I got to do, being affiliated with My Father's Place, is I was there when they did the tasting menus just to sample the different kinds of foods, and I think they tried like 3 or 4 different versions of French fries, and we all voted on which was it's like being on Iron Chef and being one of the judges. It was very, very cool.
Now, I've heard nothing but great things about all of it.
And you know what? The passion that they have for having great local bands, original music, I think is a real testament to their respect for musicians, both locally and for people who actually produce original music. Because you don't really see a lot of original music out there. I mean, I'm sure it is, but it's not necessarily showcased.
It's the ugly stepchild.
Yeah. And, now let's talk about social media for you guys. Where is your social media, and what do you have out there? Obviously, it's vistahillband.com is your website. Are you on Facebook? Do you do other things to promote the shows? Where's your calendar for other places that you play, throughout the year? Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Facebook is probably the number one. I mean, we supplement it with other stuff. We also, there's a website that we joined up, and professionals listen to it. A&R people listen to it, and so I forget the name of the website. But then they take that music and they apply it to their clients that want. That's how we got Life is Good with the song Moments, that they wanted to do a sweepstakes, and they were looking for an upbeat song. And so we put that song up on the website, and it got great reviews, and they started using it for their summer slogan. So it's a lot of word of mouth. Like I said, being on Long Island is kind of tough because it's just mainly cover bands. So we probably...
But isn't that true? I mean, but isn't that kind of true almost everywhere? I mean, I've been all kinds of places, upstate, all these other things, in Colorado, whatever, and most of what I've seen is like cover bands,
That's what the fans, it's just so accessible to them. They don't want to have to strain their ears listening to something new necessarily. So,
but I think we're heading down to Nashville in September. And I know in Nashville, these places, they do encourage. Yeah. So people are there to listen to music. And so that's the primary focus on that. Yeah, sure, you could eat your French fries or whatever it is while you're doing it, but that's the difference. And it's kind of sad, and I don't want to keep poo-pooing Long Island or New York, but you would think New York, this is where we got Billy Joel, and we got all these entertainers, that there's really not a venue and a support system for these original music players.
Well, one of the things that, at least an observation of mine, that kind of helped in that decline was the loss of like WLIR.
Absolutely.
Because WLIR really showcased and took chances on all kinds of new music and things like that. because it was Long Island radio. Although the joke was, what does LIR stand for? It was low income radio. In fact, I think Larry Dunn may have said that in the movie by Ellen Goldfarb.
In contrast, when we were in Europe, we went there with one concert booked in France. Rented a car, station wagon. All of our equipment was with us, and we played that one gig, all original, and the people loved it. And from there, we got 7 other gigs through the next 5 weeks.
Wow,
big ones. I mean, 400 or 500 people in a venue. That was and they appreciated it.
It's a different vibe.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like I remember reading like the Ramones were bigger in Europe than they were here.
Yeah,
they went over there and they were just exploded all over the place. And he was like, yeah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a shame. One of the things at least that I try to do on this show, amongst all the other shows that we do, is we really try to get the FM debut broadcasts of songs and artists and things like that to really get the word out there. So I appreciate you guys being here to help in that effort.
Our pleasure.
So you went to Europe. So give me some great tour stories or great things that were. I think you told me about a dinner with somebody quite famous.
Yes. We were on a trip to Paris, France, and a good friend of mine, Jean-Louis Lafont, was a DJ on Europe #1, radio DJ. And I was staying with him. Mark was at a hotel, and we were going out. And he didn't want to go out. He was a recluse. And so his wife, Bridget, went out, and their daughter, Zoe, and I went out. And we went to this famous restaurant, La Copule. And we sit down, and we actually met who was waiting for us, a record producer. And the record producer said, "Oh, Eric Clapton's over there." And we looked over there, and there was Eric Clapton, I guess, with his band. And about 10 minutes went by, and the waiter came over and handed Jean-Lou's wife, Brigitte, who was quite attractive, a note. And we're all gathering around, and we look at the note, and the note says, "If the gentleman to the left of you is your husband or lover, I apologize. Otherwise, I'd love to buy you a drink."
Wow.
And so 30 seconds later, he comes walking over, and the record producer quickly gets up and kind of pushes Eric Clapton to sit down next to Brigitte. And we sit down, and we're just kind of, "Hey, I'm having dinner with Eric Clapton," and just looking and just stalking and gazing, what's going on and listening. And quite frankly, he didn't know anyone who was around. His sole purpose there was to focus on Bridget and try to get Bridget to, I guess, come back to his hotel room or whatever. And Eric, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but I had to tell the truth.
Well, truth is the defense.
Yes. And so he actually had invited us to go to his concert the following day, but we had one of our gigs. And so we couldn't. Did
you ask him to join your band?
Yeah, come on over to us.
Hey,
he was a little busy in front of 30,000 people, but that was my experience with Eric Clapton.
We had a fiasco the first night that we played. We were in London at the London Pizza House or something. It was a jazz rock venue. We got all of our equipment overseas. I got the 220 adapters. We were very green. So, I got a 220 adapter. I went to Radio Shack and got a 220 adapter. Well, we plugged it in.
Radio Shack doesn't even exist anymore.
Exactly.
Which is sad,
That's how old that is. And we played 15 minutes of the first song, and all of a sudden, one of the amplifiers started to smoke, and another amplifier started to smoke. And before you know it, we burned out all the equipment. So we lasted about 25 minutes before our equipment was fried. We got the free pizza.
Yeah, free pizza was good.
But we had to buy all new equipment.
Was it good as New York pizza?
Nothing's as good as New York pizza.
Was there, okay, so, the band Arcade Fire was named after an arcade fire, and Smoke on the Water was there a song out of the Burning Circuits or something?
We should have done that.
It's still not too late.
It's not too late.
It's not too late.
If there's a line or credit, I'll,
Dedicated to you, Rich.
There you go. Give me some other great stories from the road, Yeah, obviously Eric Clapton was able to, use his rock star, status to sort of, open some doors.
When we were first starting out, our claim to fame is we played at CBGB's, but that's not the whole truth. We played at CBGB's Cafe, which was right next door to CBGB's. And so at that time, we were an 8-piece band, and we were experimenting with a larger band. And we schlepped into the city, and we unloaded all the equipment, and we put everything up, and the sound check, and da-da-da. And we look out there, and there's about 5 people in the audience. And we started playing, which is what you're supposed to do. And 3 people got up and they started walking. And the 2 people that were left are kind of looking at each other. And I just stopped and said, please don't leave. Please don't leave. And they ended up staying for a little bit and then they left. But the show must go on. And we just played like it was a rehearsal. And we were in the city and we had a great time. And we went and got falafel afterwards. And that's part of being on the road.
Oh yes, look, I wrote a book, and I remember doing like the book signings, and sometimes the crowds at the bookstores were a little small, and if you took away the people that I actually asked to come, it was even smaller. So yeah, but that's the life of a creative.
It's the life.
Yeah,
we regularly play up in Ridgefield, Connecticut, at the Ridgefield Playhouse. And we would open up for the band America whenever they would go up there. And so we had our dressing room and they had their dressing room. And at one point, I wanted my girls, who at the time were in their young teens, to kind of come up. And it was important for me to have them see, look at your dad. If I can have a dream and I can do this, I want you to know that it's possible for you to do this. And I just remember the next day being in the car and I'm singing and they're saying, Dad, shut up. Just shut up. And I'm thinking to myself, but last night I just opened up for the band America. And they're like, I don't really care. Shut up, okay? And that kind of grounds you and kind of keeps reality.
Was there, I remember like the first time I was driving, and I heard myself on the FM, in the car, and I was like, "Wow, that, it's like really cool." And it was just funny. I just had the station on, and was there a moment like that where you heard like your music or something like that, where you're like, "Hey, wow, that's just it's cool." And what is it like to hear yourself, not as the performer, but as like the listener? What is that like for you?
First time I heard it on the radio, they mispronounced my last name. So I was just focusing that they said Aronowitz instead of Arnowitz. So that was the first crushing blow. And then the second thing is, wow, that's who's not going to have an ego and say, wow, that's really cool. But there's also something to it where you're at a party or something and somebody wants to play and they're doing it as a gesture of respect, I guess. And for me, okay, I'd rather listen to something else. We're so much more critical of our music than anybody else. So that's how I feel. I don't know.
Yeah, I find when I hear something, when I hear one of our songs, being played somewhere, my first thought is, we could have done that part better, or maybe it needed that. Because the fact is, if you're a perfectionist, which we are, you're never quite satisfied.
I can't get no doo-doo.
And I'm sure they have their own problems.
At what point do you listen to music and say it's good enough versus it needs to be better?
I think it's at some point, after you've reworked a song for a month and it sounds good, you kind of have to take a step back and say, okay, I think it's there. We could change this, change that, but you may come back full circle and realize the first thing that you did was the best.
Right, that's true. It's funny. For people who don't write music, you don't appreciate the struggle of the process. Just as people who write books and articles and other things of websites, whatever it is that you create. We kind of take it for granted as consumers that all this stuff is there. You turn on the radio and it's endless content. You put on the TV, there's endless content. You put on the web, there's endless content. I mean, the web is just, infinite. But there was all of these people out there who started with zero, blank paper, blank computer screens, blank tape, blank pictures, and then somehow through a tremendous creative struggle, all this stuff is created. But yet, when you're on the receiving end of it, it's like you go to the supermarket. There's all this stuff, but there were farmers and and truck drivers and everything in between that actually, and marketing people and who actually, and cows, chickens and all of it, that actually made it all happen. And we don't really appreciate that.
It takes a village. It really does.
Yeah,
and it goes from just one little seed of an idea, from an emotion, and it just starts blossoming and blossoming and blossoming, and hopefully you want it to continue. And that's why we love doing originals, because you can get that instant feedback when you start performing. When I'm up there and I'm performing and I'm singing, playing guitar, the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at people's feet. because if
so
I
they're
look at their
tapping?
feet and they're tapping, I know I've got something there.
Oh, that's cool. That's great.
it's,
That's a
you
great
know,
insight.
Lights are in your eyes, and so you look down, and all you really can see is, for me, focusing on the feet and see what's going on.
All right, so we have like a minute. So what should I play as our bumper song here? What do you like?
Why don't you put "I Know a Girl"? It's a song that I wrote that I wanted to be a romantic song, and what happened is when I presented it to the band, somehow it came out, "I Know a Girl, You've Got the Wrong One On."
Yeah, I think you've got Promenade on.
Yeah.
Okay.
It came out as a reggae type of song like this.
All right, so this is Richard Solomon, taking care of business. My father's plays radio. We'll listen to this little musical interlude before we go to a break.
I know a girl, you can touch her tongue to her nose. Take a pen and paper, then write beautiful prose. Grows her own garden, works out every day. Then she gives me love in her own
All right, we'll be right back.
Hey, this is Jeff Matson, the Dark Star Orchestra, and you're listening to Richard Solomon on WCWP 88.1 FM.
All right, Richard Solomon, taking care of business. My father's place radio. This is a song called "Becoming."
And knocked you off your feet. Then they turned around and asked you what you need. If you change your mind and offer some forgiveness, that's a start.
All right, Richard Solomon in the studio with the band Vista Hill. They will be performing at my father's place at the Roslyn Hotel, and we were lucky enough to grab them pretty much before they went down the road a little bit, down Northern Boulevard, and got them into the studio, and we're sharing great stories, great music, great passion for music, and a little bit about history. So let's talk about the history of this album being produced and how it's a little bit different from maybe what you've done in the past, especially, given 40 years of, music and musicianship. And I'm sure, many years ago there was no Facebook, YouTube, or, things like that. So how has the process changed? Is it easier and harder, both less? I hear all kinds of things from people. Give me your take.
Well, number one of the reasons why I wanted to build my own studio was to avoid all the time constraints that you have when you're working in someone else's studio.
And the slapping.
So, I built a good studio, good sound, good equipment. And one of the things that's different from some of these other studios is that everyone is now using plugins, software to actually enhance and change and modify all the audio, as opposed to all the old hardware that was out there, which is great, but honestly,
it's not as authentic.
The plugins aren't as authentic as a CLA 76 compressor that was, that now would cost $10,000, but you really can't tell the difference. People who say that they can, most of them are lying. So with the equipment that we have and with the software that we have, we're able to produce a high quality recording, and we have all day to do it. We don't have a 4-hour window. We don't have a 2-hour. We don't have someone coming right behind us where we've got to get out. That made things easier. It enabled us to expand the creative process.
Well, the other advantage that no one realizes is you can leave all your stuff.
Yes.
No one will, your settings are set, your equipment is, your notes, whatever. You can kind of just leave it, take a break, and then all your stuff is exactly where it needs to be. Whereas if you're sharing space, other people's food and beverages, notes and stuff is all over the place. Because, it's like here at the station, after you do your show, you got to take, your equipment and leave. Whereas when I record in other places where it's more of a permanent thing for myself, everything's already set. I just turn the equipment on and the levels are right, and everything is just perfect, and all my notes and everything that I use is all just there. Nothing has to be reset, retimed, or recalibrated.
Right.
I feel it's a double-edged sword. It certainly made things more accessible with today's computers and software. We have a system, and I know other people that do it. If they're looking for a flute player, What they'll do, there's a website that lists all these different people, and there could be a flute player in Brazil that you send the tracks to, and then he lays down his track and he sends it to you. No one has to be in the room. You could just do this globally and create your own sound. If I'm singing and all of a sudden it sounds great except for that one little note that I was off key, well, Mark goes in and he magnifies it and he sees, oh, there it is. You went a little too high on that. Click, drag it out, drag it down, and now I'm perfect.
Within reason. I mean,
reason.
You can't. Something that's bad is hard.
You can't take Rich Solomon and make him into Pavarotti.
It's not gonna. It's not gonna work.
We could try.
So I think that's the double-edged sword, that it makes it so accessible, and that's where you see on YouTube all of these young artists and what they're able to do. But the music business has changed because they can't take a risk on these young people. They'll take a risk if the guy has 200,000 hits on YouTube. And at that point, they don't even have to go in the studio. They're expecting that kid to already have, because he did it in his studio, a perfectly made track so they can market.
The other thing is, one of the things you lose, because we have the ability to record track by track and overdub, so you put a rhythm track down, put a vocal track down, put a guitar track down, all not at the same time, you lose a little bit of
the coordination?
Well, the spontaneity. And having a live performance. So, for example, when I record down there with a jazz band, if you don't have that, you're not going to have a good recording. So you have to record live there. You can't record individual tracks. And so there's a little bit of a downside there, that you have to just do it one after another. You lose a little bit of the interpersonal, the interaction that you have when you play, which is what you have on a stage.
Right, and the feedback to some extent.
Yeah.
People encourage you, or they say, oh, a little bit more, pick this up, or whatever.
Right.
It's funny, there's certain artists. I remember James Taylor did a duet with himself that I saw this live. It was kind of funny. He had a reel-to-reel tape, and I guess he had himself pre-recorded, but then he did a duet with himself.
How'd it sound?
It sounded great, but I can't imagine you doing an entire album of that. Maybe a song or two, and it works, and it's innovative and novel and things like that. But you do hear musicians where you hear them play every single instrument and they put it together. But I can't imagine that you want a career like that.
Agreed.
It's like I can't do a show that's just monologue. It wouldn't work. I need you guys. I need stories, content, passion, creativity, and that comes from the guests. I'm just here to sort of get it out of you.
And there's nothing cooler. There's nothing cooler when you're performing, and I know, looking at the audience, that Mark's going to come in on this, and he's got my back. And if I mess up on something, I'm just going to give him a look, and he's just going to keep looping it until I can kind of catch up. It's that camaraderie of playing together that everybody's kind of got your back, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Now, when you record in the studio, is it just you guys, or do you ever have other people there to sort of give you a little bit of criticism, or a little bit of a vibe, a little bit of the excitement of fans, whether it's family or friends?
We typically don't have anyone down there, and we'll play what we have, up to a point for some people and get their critique. But I don't personally like to have outsiders in the studio critiquing, moment by moment. It just...
You play differently, you sing differently. It's a different vibe when people are watching. You can't kind of separate and kind of get in your own head. It's kind of like when people go out to restaurants and everybody's all of a sudden a food critic. Well, when they're watching you perform, everybody's now all of a sudden a music critic. Phil Collins say, Mark, if you just kind of slow that down just a little bit, you might. So, it's fun, but it's not as productive as when we're together. And we're actually together for a very limited time. We're together when we're putting together the rhythm tracks, the drum and the bass. But after that, those guys can go if they want to. And then all of a sudden you start laying down these individual tracks.
What is it like to master an album? I've always wanted to know, you hear about sort of mastering and remastering, and how Jimmy Page kind of remastered all the Zeppelin songs, and what is actually done with that?
What's interesting is I just I'm in the middle of a master's program at NYU for jazz studies, but one of the electives that I took was in mastering. done by someone. His name is Alan Tucker, who pretty much masters all the jazz albums that are produced today. And he also had worked on some old albums. And one of the first things that he showed us, Al Cooper, the original singer for Blood, Sweat, and Tears, which was a great band, even before Clayton Thomas came in. Al Cooper was never happy with Child is Father to the Man, that album. He came to Alan Tucker and wanted him to remaster it. So they have the original files. And the problem was that on vinyl, there's only so much data that you can put in there. So they were limited. So the bass didn't sound quite as full. The horns didn't sound quite as sweet. It takes more data digitally to get in there. So he remastered it, and it just sounded umpteen times better. It's an art. It's a skill. It's a very tedious skill. I don't master. I'll get down to a stereo track, and then send it to someone who has real good chops when it comes to mastering.
But what are the people? I guess what I'd like to know is, for the people out there like myself, what the people who do the mastering, what do they actually do? Well, and how do they do it?
If there's a simple answer to that, it's in today's music, it's making it louder. So what they'll do is they'll take the parts that are not that loud and
enhance
they'll be louder, and so everything gets compressed in a kind of a one volume wavelength. That's so they can turn up the volume and not break the speakers. So everything that you hear is just loud, but that really destroys the quality of the music, and that's why you don't hear classical music being played like that. They don't compress the way masters compress now. But there's more to it than that. There's fine-tuning the individual instruments if they can. Fine-tuning the frequencies. The higher frequencies, they're going to bring those down. They may bring the lower frequencies up. That's what the process of mastering is. It's fading in, it's fading out.
And one thing I will tell you, this Thursday, Mark will be teaching. Part of our gig is Mark spends about a half hour in front of the audience teaching them about recording and mastering. So look forward to that.
So when you put an album together, how do you decide the order of tracks? And is that like a rock, paper, scissors thing, or is it consensus?
No, it's Sherman decides it, period.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yay.
So let me ask you, how do you decide which is the lead song?
It's usually, it's not the most popular song. For me, you're building up, just like when you're creating a set list. You want to start building it up and then give the audience a chance to relax, and then build it up again and relax just a little bit, and now you're at the end of the gig, and now you want something powerful, and why most bands are going to end with something really powerful. So there is a little bit of a science to it.
So when you do it, is it gut or is it reasoned, or a little bit of both?
Probably more gut
Okay.
than anything else, I would say.
See, so I always love asking creative people their process, because everybody approaches things so differently, and every group of musicians has their own chemistry and protocols.
There is a school of thought that because of the limited attention span of today's listeners, you put your best song first. Because if you don't put your best song first, and if they don't like the first song, they're not going to listen to the rest of it. People, because they're not going to do what we did, which is put an album on the turntable and listen to the A side, listen to the B side. People don't do it anymore,
and we thrived on that, both A side and B side.
Look, I remember a long time ago, you would listen to an album and you actually had to get used to it. You know what I'm saying? You had to and then you kind of like...
You were courting it.
Your brain is... Your hard drive is actually trying to pick up. And I remember, certain albums like, War Child and Aqualung, and listening, Minstrel in the Gallery, and like listening to them, and then trying to discover, the nuances of the songs, and then looking at the lyrics, and then maybe looking at the album art. Because in those days, it was more of an integrated experience.
Totally.
It wasn't just listening. It was, you watched sort of almost the turntable as if it did something. You looked at the album cover. Sometimes the sleeve had lyrics on it. Sometimes on the sleeve there was, a subdued artwork, and you wanted to see what the artwork was, whether it gave you clues to the meanings of the songs, and the artwork was big enough to actually appreciate where, when it went to a CD format, what may have been something like, very, very easy to see, maybe a little compressed, a little harder to see. Maybe they had maybe like some of the albums were like triple fold, and really, and here you're going from a triple fold to something much smaller. Something got like Thick as a Brick was like a newspaper, and I don't know how you take something like Thick as a Brick and then stream it and then get the same.
All that's gone.
Yeah,
it's a lost art. It's gone.
In addition, you listen to an album. In the old days, you listen to an album, and if you listen to it enough, you have a feeling about when this song ends, that song begins. They're part of the same.
It's the brothers and sisters. They're siblings.
Right. Family.
Because that's what Ian Anderson said. They're like brothers and sisters. Yeah. Well, what's also interesting? In some ways, the skips, the pops, the hisses actually brought something very authentic to the music. Actually, what was really funny is Dennis McNamara told me a great story. Dennis McNamara, for the people who are listening, was the program director of WLIR. We had him, and he's up on our YouTube site. And he tells this great story. He was driving to WLIR. He was I guess, getting coffee, and I guess he was listening, and he heard shk, 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 and that was just going on the air. It's like shk, shk. It's like, oh, and I said, I know what that is. That's the last part of the album going back and repeating because the album's over.
Right.
So apparently the DJ passed out. The album was going shk. He revived the guy, and they had to go back to the music.
Oh my.
But that really wouldn't exist anymore because it would go to the next track, the next sequence. Like even on YouTube, it'll autoplay something, even if you don't pick something.
I thought your shik was boom boom boom.
I think you're thinking as a musician, this was just the music ran out and the DJ, but it's sort of interesting. We only have 2.5 minutes left. What else could I share with all the people out there who are your fans and the people who will become your fans? What should they know that they haven't heard about the album, about you guys, about your passion, about your music, about your recording process?
A lot of people ask us where we got the name Vista Hill.
Okay.
And back in the day, I loved to ride my bicycle. And I lived in Great Neck, and I would do whatever number of miles. I'd like to say 70 miles, but it was probably 7 miles. And I always ended up going and riding up Vista Hill in Great Neck. And if you look at Vista Hill, even if you're in a car, you shake your head and you say, I don't think I can make it. And so I would be on my bicycle and I'd be riding up Vista Hill, and there'd be one guy on my shoulder representing my dad who would say, you can't do it. You're not going to be able to do it. And there'd be another guy on my shoulder saying, come on, you can do it. You can do it. Keep riding, keep riding. And that was the genesis for the band's name and the song that I wrote called Vista Hill.
Now it's interesting. You must have been a fan of Bugs Bunny because there was always the good, the good guy and the devil.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No names.
So, all right. So you'll be performing at My Father's Place.
Yes.
At myfathersplace.com and vistahillband.com. And is there any email or Facebook or something like that to contact you to tell you how great you were when the people actually hear you?
We love hearing from people, so just go on Facebook and just say, hey, we heard you and we thought you were great, and we'll see you next Thursday. We'll be on around 9 o'clock.
All right, and for the people who are listening in the future, and this is history, it was a great show, and we'll probably have them back. So there you go.
Thanks so much, Rich.
We're going to close out with "I Know a Girl."
Let's do Vista Hill.
Where's Vista Hill? Where's that?
From Looking for Tara, is it not?
I'm not sure. It should be on there. I hope it's on there. Otherwise, we'll have to sing it in the studio.
There we go. Let's just play this because we only have a second. See, this is because we don't have a crack staff. It's just me. All right. For those out there who are listening, have a great week.
Love's been raining down on me, soaking wet I cannot see. Are you my sunny day?